Wow, babe. Last night was incredible, and this morning too, Amy said with a playful smile. I think you've truly outdone yourself. When was the last time we got this much action in just 12 hours? I chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. Since the girls were born, I think. Having an empty nest definitely has its perks. Amy snuggled closer, and I held her tightly. After 20 years of marriage, she still felt like home. I miss the girls, she admitted softly, but it feels so good to have this time with you. Her words made my mind drift back through the years. I thought of our journey, how we dated, fell in love, and eventually got married. Then came the whirlwind of parenthood. The girls arrived 1 year apart, turning our lives into a beautiful chaos. They went from playing with dolls to riding bikes, then to soccer games and boyfriends. Before we knew it, they were getting driver's licenses and graduating high school. Now, they were off at college, hundreds of miles away, and the house felt so different without them. I kissed the top of Amy's head, my heart full. These last 20 years have flown by so fast. But now, it's just us again, and I want to make the most of this time. Let's be the couple we were back then, 2 decades ago. Amy laughed softly. We're not newlyweds anymore. But who says we can't keep the spark alive? I smiled as I traced gentle circles on her hand, savoring the softness of her skin. Her contented sigh filled the room, and I felt blissfully at peace. Just as sleep began to pull me under, she tilted her head up and kissed me. Tim, she whispered, being with you is one of my greatest joys. I know you feel the same way. We're so good together, and I never want that to change. Half asleep, I murmured back, you make me happier than I could ever say. I'm so lucky to have you. She leaned in for another kiss, her voice soft and full of emotion. What we have is so special. I want us to keep building this life together, to spoil our grandchildren one day, and to grow old side by side. Too tired to reply, I simply nodded and pulled her close. She kissed me again, her touch warm and comforting. But, she added, her voice suddenly playful, before grandkids take over our lives and we settle into old age, I want one more adventure. Something thrilling. Something just for us. Her words began to pull me from the haze of sleep. My brow furrowed as I looked at her, curious. What kind of adventure are we talking about? She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. I know it's a little selfish, but I want to do something bold while we still can. Before the window closes, as my thoughts slowly surfaced, a nagging alarm in my mind grew louder. Something Amy said, it had been about one last adventure, but there was something unsettling about how she had said it. I loved adventure, sure, but this felt different. I opened my eyes to find her studying me intently. Her face, framed by that untamed halo of blonde hair, was both beautiful and troubled. Her eyes searched mine as if trying to gauge my reaction. I reached for her hand and began stroking it absent-mindedly. An adventure? I asked cautiously. What kind of adventure are we talking about? She leaned in, brushing her lips against mine with a familiar tenderness. It's a little selfish, she admitted softly. The alarm bells in my head went from distant to deafening. Selfish? I asked, sitting up straighter. What do you mean? This adventure, it's just for you, not for us? Amy hesitated, wrinkling her nose slightly as if uncomfortable with her answer. Well, yes, but it doesn't mean you can't have your own adventure too. My pulse quickened, fueled by the adrenaline coursing through me. I braced myself against the headboard, my focus now entirely on her. Amy, I said firmly, stop dancing around the point and just tell me what you mean by adventure. She leaned back slightly, her expression apologetic. I didn't mean to upset you, she began cautiously. I'm not upset yet, I replied. But that depends on what you're about to say. Amy sighed, clearly reluctant but pressing on. You know Dan from work, the guy from sales? He was bragging about the sailboat he and his brother Rob bought last month. Susan, my cubicle neighbor, went sailing with them over the weekend, and she said it was amazing. She's already planning to go again. I must have said it sounded fun because Dan invited us both to go sailing next weekend. I stared at her, incredulous. So, let me get this straight. Some guy I've never met invited my wife to spend the weekend with him and his brother on a boat? Amy hesitated, her voice quieter now. Well, it's a 3-day weekend because of Labor Day, so it's not just any weekend. My jaw clenched. Amy, are you hearing yourself? That's not selfish. That's downright reckless. She smiled weakly. I've got pictures of the boat if you want to see. It's gorgeous, really. Susan said she had such a great time, sailing around the lake, sunbathing on the deck. I cut her off, unable to contain my frustration. Susan is single. You're married. Do you not see how inappropriate this is? I know, baby, she replied softly, reaching for me, but I pulled back. It's just one weekend. One last adventure. I threw the blanket aside and got out of bed, pacing now. Absolutely not. There is no way I'm letting you go play around on a boat with your co-worker and his brother. This isn't just about sailing. Don't act like it is. Amy's cheeks flushed as she looked down at the bed. It's not like I said I was going to sleep with him. Then why do you think they invited you? I snapped. Did Susan tell you what happened on her little adventure with them? Amy's voice faltered. Well, yes, she did. But just because she slept with them doesn't mean I will. Unbelievable. I shook my head, my disbelief growing by the second. And her whole story about lounging on the deck and then sleeping with both of them. What part of that makes you think this is a good idea? She looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. Tim, it's just one weekend. You can do whatever you want while I'm gone. When I get back, we'll move on, like it never happened. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh even to my own ears. So let me get this straight. You've already planned this little adventure, and I'm just supposed to accept it? To come up with some distraction while you're off with two strangers. Her voice was barely a whisper now. I didn't mean for it to hurt you. It's not about the boat, Amy, I said, my voice rising. It's about the fact that you're more interested in spending a weekend with two random guys than with your husband. If you wanted an adventure, you could have come to me. We could have rented a boat ourselves. But that's not what you want, is it? Her lip trembled as she whispered, I'm sorry, Tim. I realized I'd probably gotten caught up in the excitement of Susan's story. It had sounded like such a grand adventure, and for a moment, I convinced myself it was something harmless. I'm sorry, Amy said, her voice full of regret. I'll tell them I'm not going. Just 20 minutes ago, I was as happy as I'd ever been, holding her in my arms. I had felt content, confident in our love, and secure in her commitment to our marriage. Now, everything felt like it had shattered. I had been deluding myself into thinking she felt the same way, equally content and devoted. But now, I wasn't so sure. No, I said, my voice breaking with the weight of the realization. I thought it was real. I thought we were real. But maybe it was just a fantasy. No, Tim, it's not a fantasy, Amy pleaded, her voice shaking. I really love you. I always will. Please, baby. I'm so stupid. I don't know what I was thinking. I wasn't thinking at all. I'm so sorry. Please, ignore everything I said. I didn't respond as I walked into the bathroom, closing the door behind me. I turned the shower on, letting the warm water wash away the remnants of what had just happened between us. My mind felt numb, still reeling from the shock of her suggestion. How could she think I'd ever agree to something so hurtful? When I stepped out, Amy was lying on the bed, face down, sobbing loudly. She lifted her head and looked at me, her face streaked with tears. I sat down beside her, and she immediately moved into my arms, clinging to me as if she needed my touch to breathe. I stroked her hair, trying to calm her, but the storm inside me didn't quiet. For 22 years, you've made me believe in us, I said softly. I thought we wanted the same things. I thought we had the same dreams. I never once doubted you, until today. Oh my God, Tim. I'm so sorry, she cried. While you were in the shower, I kept thinking about what I said, about what I had planned. I asked myself how I would feel if the situation was reversed. What if two girls had invited you to go swimming for the weekend? The thought made me sick to my stomach. It was selfish. It was like I was acting like a teenager, not a wife, not a mother. I feel so ashamed of myself, so stupid. How do we move forward from here? How can I trust myself again? How can I trust you? I could hear the devastation in her voice, and it echoed in my chest. Amy, this isn't like you. This isn't who you've been for the last 22 years. How did we get here? I don't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I think I took you for granted. You've always been there for me, so reliable, so devoted. And maybe, just maybe, I thought I could get away with indulging in a selfish whim. I neglected you, I disrespected you. I thought it would be fun, and I just forgot about everything else. Her words pierced me. This wasn't the woman I had known, the woman I had loved. But this is so unlike you, I said, shaking my head. At least the you I've known for over 2 decades. You've always been someone I could count on. I know, baby, I know, she replied, tears streaming down her face. Please tell me what I can do to make this right. I know it's my fault, but what can I say or do to get you to give me a chance to fix this? I sat there, devastated, my thoughts scattered. I don't know, Amy. Our marriage feels broken. Everything I thought was solid is now a question. I feel lost. You're not lost, Tim, she whispered, her hand reaching for mine. This is all me. I let my selfishness take over. Your love and devotion, it's what allowed me to take it for granted. But I see that now. I should have cherished it. I should have treasured it. I felt her words, but the damage had been done. You're asking me to believe in you again. But how can I? You almost shattered everything we built. How do I even begin to trust you again? I know, baby. I don't deserve your trust. But I'm asking you, please, give me a chance to prove that I understand. Let me show you that I can fix this, that I'll make things right. I'll do anything to save what we have. I looked at her, still unsure. But part of me, deep down, wanted to believe that we could heal, that this wasn't the end. I don't know, Amy, but I'll listen. I wasn't sure if it was Amy's pleading that convinced me, or if I was just desperate to believe that the woman I had loved for 22 years was still there beneath the surface. But I nodded, despite the lingering hurt. Amy threw herself into my arms, sobbing and kissing me repeatedly. Call Susan. Tell her you're not going, she said, her voice shaky. And Amy, I added, pulling back slightly to look her in the eyes, promise me you'll stay away from Dan at work. Either you or Susan, or both of you, need to let him know that it's not okay to invite you to spend the weekend with him. You need to make it clear that you would never do that. Amy nodded earnestly, her eyes filled with remorse. I promise. I'll make it right. Then, after a moment of silence, she added, You know, maybe I should think about going to work for your sister at her bakery. We don't need the extra money, but she could really use the help. It would be the responsible thing to do. The mature, unselfish, adult thing to do. She smiled, trying to lighten the mood. I couldn't help but smile in return, grateful for her effort to make things right. Epilogue. I thought about what had happened for quite a while. It was hard to come to terms with it, but I couldn't bring myself to believe that 22 years together should be ruined by one selfish mistake that Amy ultimately abandoned. I was still deeply hurt by her disrespect, but I knew I needed to give her the chance to make amends. It wasn't easy, and it took time, but gradually, the doubts I had about her faded. Amy found joy in working at the bakery until she retired to spend more time with our grandchildren. As for me, I still have a year or 2 before I can join her in retirement. Once I retire, Amy says she's ready for a new adventure with me and no one else.